All right, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll kick this work session off. So this is just intended to basically bring the two conversations, the two work sessions that we've had on the substation and the power generation together as one big discussion. I know Scott and the finance committee and Corey did a lot of discussion on Friday about it, and we sent all that information out to you guys, so you had it to look through. So Scott, I wouldn't mind kind of if you could just give a brief synopsis of what we covered on Friday,
Yeah.
and then we can kick it off to the staff.
Yeah, first of all, Jeff did all the work. So really was just trying to ask, as we're looking at adding to maintain the ability to provide peak, our peak load at all times throughout the year, I thought it important that I didn't know what it cost us, per resident to have that capability. I don't know if any of you know what it costs or knew. I don't know if it's important. I don't know if it'd be too much, but I thought it'd be a good place to start. It's like, what does it cost us? And Rob and Jeff were very amenable about, yeah, let's look at that. I think it makes sense. So just ask for a bunch of data around, things like peak load, so we kind of know where our responsibility is if we want to provide power to everybody every day of the year. And then just kind of how many times in the last, I think you had 3 or 4 years, have we actually generated power, and what were the reasons? So it's how many times did we take advantage of this asset that we have? We looked at that. And then it's really just a matter of, okay, here's the budget, the operating expense for the generation side of the utility. And I think it was 650, I'm just talking round numbers, you guys got the data, but around 650,000 a year of budget line items that support the operation of generating electricity in the power plant. So then Jeff did a good job saying, okay, let's look at a couple of scenarios where if we didn't have this, if we didn't generate our own electricity, right? So it gets into that whole issue around capacity that we can generate and capacity we could buy, right? So you have to have one or the other, or a combination of both. So Jeff looked at, okay, if we didn't generate any power, we could reduce our operating expense for that utility. And I think we've got the numbers here. I just don't want to misquote it. So we looked at 2 scenarios. One was
These two?
generating, I'm just going to pull it up. One was generating no generation, but maintaining 1 employee, because there's still some things that need to be done in that space potentially. So we looked at a budget there, assuming, so we have 2022 as a baseline. Then he looked at it as, well, if we didn't generate any power, we could remove a lot of line items. So we kept 1 employee. It looked like it would save us about $230K in savings. And then the other one was, if we didn't have the employee, there's about $334K. I know these numbers don't line up, Jeff, with yours. I think the numbers you show are starting in 2027 with the extra $80,000 for the for the GRDA if it went away. So just roughly trying to think of, okay, how would this thing look from an average bill expense, 2022 budget. We didn't generate any of our own power. We bought it. We bought the capacity, and we bought continued to buy the power. And I know I'm kind of lumping a lot of things together here, but I just kind of want to get to the bottom line. Was what his analysis showed was, if you broke it out into Baker, USD 348, commercial customers and residential customers were the four types that he broke it out in. And if you look at the residential, and I think based on my math, about 1,558 meters. Does that sound about right?
It's
1,700. It's 1,700.
Yeah.
So I did my math. I couldn't reverse back engineer the number. But anyway, 1,700 meters. If you looked at those, the average. So if we didn't generate any power, we bought paper capacity. We kept an employee. He would save about $6.47 a month per residential meter. If we didn't have the employee, the second option was if we looked at that, would be about $944. So $78 a year. And then the deeper cut would be about $113 a year. And then just to look at, hey, if we didn't have any of the $650,000 expense, it'd be about $213 expense per customer to fund that utility. Now that does not include debt, right? None of that's in there. We would also have a lower reserve, about 200 grand less reserve we would need if we didn't have our own utility. So that's kind of a minimum, I think. In my mind, if you put the debt in there, I'm comfortable saying somewhere between $200, $250 a year is really what the city's paying, citizens are paying on average, there'll be more or less, to have our own generating capacity, capability, to meet the peak demand or peak for the year and the calculations that who does the calculations? Jeff. Jamie. Yeah. So to meet that peak capacity, that's roughly what it would cost an average bill. I don't know what the median is. I don't know how many are above that or below that. That's just taking the total savings divided by number of meters. So to me, that gives me a sense we can have that discussion with somebody that asks kind of what it costs us to do that. There are other benefits we talked about in having our own generating capability and how we can actually go buy power. So those things that need to be considered. So there's advantages to that. So I was just trying to baseline it so that as a city we can go, okay, this is what we believe it costs us somewhere in this range. If we think it's worth it, we're going to continue to maintain that. And if we think it's worth it to continue to build to the peak, then we're going to have to continue to maintain that as well. So went over a lot. We had multiple conversations, so that's about a 5-minute dissertation on a lot of information. So questions, I don't know if you looked at it, thoughts, comments. Correct me if I misstated anything there.
Well, the other thing you didn't bring up is this all hinges on the price of what paper capacity is trading for.
Right.
And the energy call option.
I'm sorry?
And the energy call
Right,
option.
yes,
Right.
yeah, so,
So all we can do is look at what it is today
Right.
and historically. And then, again, we can look at scenarios. Yeah. So there could be scenarios where it gets worse, could be scenarios where it gets better.
and the number you quoted didn't include the 3 megawatts of GRDA either, which will expire in 2026 unless we renew it. So it would figure in there too.
So good point. In 2027, I think it expires in 26, right?
Yep.
So 27, so the number drops to 50 annual for the first scenario, like 86 for the second. And then if we had none, no utility, no generation utility would be like 186. So that 80 grand is a cost that we'd have to incur anyway, or because we don't have the GRDA, we have to provide that. So again, in my mind, I think, to me it's, $200, $250 a year on average that, depending on the debt load, as it fluctuates, that I think we pay for the ability to generate more power. Now, the other thing he showed, I think it's important to talk about, is how often did we take advantage of that? And I think he showed from 2018, about 200 hours. And I think you provided that information in what we put out on the website. So about 200 hours, one event, the last 2020 February event. Was it 2020? 21. Okay, 21 February event was 100 hours in itself, roughly. 100 grand. So,
And that saved us about 700,000.
right. Yep. So saved us about 700,000 versus what other cities, or what we would have had to have paid to provide the power, to buy the power.
When we say 1,700 meters,
Yeah.
are those households or does that include commercial?
Now, commercials, about how many? I had about 222, but I'm sure my math is wrong there.
I've got to break down, there's 1,787 residential, 222 commercial, there's 22 distributed generation. It has to be broken out separately, and that's businesses and residential combined. And then Baker University has 9 meters.
So yours broke it down to where you're talking about only the impacts of those 7.
Yeah, I was just talking about the
Okay.
residential only.
Got it.
Yeah, it's different, and you have that information. It's different for the commercial meters. It's different for USD
Right.
340 anyway. But yeah, and it's all out there. So again, just looking at how often we used it, and what we have to pay for it, then we have to make that value decision going forward.
The other part of the conversation that we talked about and came out of it, I think, was the fact that since we do generate our own power, we have options available to us to buy power where somebody like Eudora, who doesn't generate their own power, they're kind of pigeonholed with Evergy or whatever company they're buying all their power from. So they're kind of at their mercy. Similar, I equate it in my mind similar to what our water situation is with Lawrence. We're kind of pigeonholed into that. That's how Eudora is with their.
Yeah, I think they have options, but they have options to sign up to a contract, and typically do a multi-year contract.
Correct.
Right. So if they sign up to a 4-year contract, they don't get to go on the spot market and go necessarily do what we can do because we have that ability. So that is one of the advantages to do that. I don't think we've been analyzed really how much that saved us. Depends on what kind of contract you would enter into for a long range contract, right? If you got into a poor one, then it'd be a great advantage to be able to spot buy in the market. So that's really what we talked about. I think it is important that we understand that. I think it's important that as we talk about, adding to that capacity, it's going to just increase that number, obviously.
Well,
It'll spread it out.
not necessarily increase it because we're letting the debt fall off from the current.
Right. Well,
And we're replacing that debt, so it's not necessarily increase.
Also
well,
depends on the price of the paper capacity, that's everything.
So
It's
he
true.
projected on Friday that would go from $2.25 to $4.
So in the last 5 years, it's ranged from $1.66 to $3.50. They went out for bids for 2026 paper,
Right.
and it came back at $4.
Okay. So but how do we feel about that 4? Do we feel like that's going to be a pretty?
I think everybody thinks that it's going to go up.
So okay, with that, when he plugged in 4, I think it's important.
scenario.
It's important to note that by 2023 or by 2030, we would be in that scenario saving rather than costing. Am I reading that right?
yeah, I think that was
Saving
that
as
was
far
the-
as
that was
our
the
own
break even.
generation, or
Yeah. Okay. Break even. So it looks like
That was the buy versus
that was the
make.
break even. It's 2030.
break even on making our own energy.
That's the sale of paper capacity, or the opportunity of not purchasing paper capacity savings. That
If we continue to generate our own power.
correct. Assuming that the debt would be neutral because the power plant's falling off is that 2026 when that falls off?
It's using a 4.
It's actually earlier than that, I think.
It's completely
Is it
off.
2026?
It's 26, yeah.
26 is what he showed
Right.
us. Yeah.
So assuming that all the debt stays neutral at that point, that we don't add any extra debt,
Using the
then
4 paper.
well, actually, those numbers would change because then your generation increases, which increases your paper capacity, right?
Yes.
So we would actually have more paper capacity in this scenario than what's on here.
Yes.
So our break even would be earlier than 2030 in that
So
scenario.
it's about 2026 is almost a break even.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, it's not. That's 966 versus 996. The break even's in 2030.
No, I'm looking at this one.
911 versus 913.
Total cost is what I'm saying.
Okay, you're looking down there.
Yeah. That's where you're referring to if you look at status quo.
Okay,
versus
got it.
Buy. It's about a wash, 2026.
Right. So it's earlier.
Yeah.
But it's not, because if we add generation, then we add more paper capacity, which changes those numbers. That assumes the same generation, right?
No, he worked the capacity up from 13 up to 13.8. It looks like.
Okay.
3 of that.
So yeah, I mean, get in the weeds. I think, but your point, there is a point potentially if the paper capacity gets to where they think it's going to be, it becomes more attractive to not have to buy it, depending on your cost to continue your cost up, if we're gonna go up as well, right? So, I mean, I went in as no preconceived notion, I just wanted to know, so we could answer the question.
Sure.
You know, and I think we have a pretty good handle on it. I'm not gonna make a value judgment for anybody else, it's kind of everybody's own opinion. I know the February event, everybody's very glad to have it. So we have a recent example of when it was very valuable.
Alright. So I guess with that, do you have an update on the substation side?
So, I mean, we had a discussion with Evergy in February 11th, on transmission line. Basically, they gave us prices on what it would cost, what it's going to cost them to build the 34.5 transmission line, and it's $250,000 a mile on overhead, $706,000 a mile on underground. Now, in saying that, they also stated that they're not interested in building any transmission line to us, that we can tap off of them, and we build our own, which my crew, myself, are more than capable of doing, and maintain it. So, and then on top of that, there will be a $200,000, around $200,000 switch that has to be installed on the transmission line, which is automated. So you can still have the capability of feeding the new substation with both feeds. So those are the numbers that they gave me. Now, as I said before, the prices of everything, wire, transformers, stuff like that, keeps going crazy. It's going up. Lead times have gotten ridiculous. Transformers lead times are 1.5 to 2 years now. So if I need a transformer right now for out in the field or anything like that, be waiting for 1.5 to 2 years, unless I can find one, by going to other cities and asking for one. But substation transformers are going to be probably that long also. Wire and other material is getting to be 6 months to a year out to get anything in. So even when if decide to go forward with this project, prices are going to go up, and material is going to be out there to get the material. So we had a meeting with some of the distributors. They're talking 35 to 70% increases in prices by the end of this year. So in saying that, I mean, I went back on the distribution part and figured up what it would cost to build new distribution line to each site, because we're still looking at each site because we haven't really, nothing's been concluded on that. Site 1, which is the school, the distribution was going to cost around $3 million, a little over $3 million. Site 2 is 2.5.
What's that too?
Site 2 is the old trailer park that Myers is selling, which the sign's still up. It hasn't, nothing's been concluded there. Site 3 is the trailer park across 2nd Street from that. That's $2.2 million. And Site 4, which is Ralph Earl's property, was 3.7. And I have some of these. I'll get to you. The transmission line, on figuring with the switches added into that, Site 1, which is the school area, was $950,000. Site 2, and that's 3 miles. Site 2 and 3 were the same because they're the same location, was $600,000, and that's 1.6 miles. And Site 4, which is Ralph Earl's, 1.2 miles, and that's $500,000, and that's with the switch included. Like I said, those numbers are probably gonna go up as we go further into the year. And the distribution numbers too. Now the distribution numbers, I took those off of using material that I've bought in the past 2 months, took those prices and did it myself because the distributors do not want to give you numbers for, they only give you numbers for like a week to 2 weeks, and that's it, because it just keeps going up. So I took those numbers, I went around measuring stuff with the measuring wheel, which, by the way, there's 500 or 5,280 feet in a mile, if you didn't know that. It was a lot of walking.
Good workout, Chris.
It was a
Come
good
on.
workout.
Yeah.
Actually, I had one police officer ask me if I was having trouble walking on the street.
Walking outside the road?
Yeah. But anyways, taking those numbers and with all it roughly worked out to about $90 a foot with boring. If we do and this is all underground. These are underground numbers. These are not overhead because you guys were wanting to go everything underground. So, it's roughly $90 a foot. Figure in the material, figure wire, conduit, boring. Now that did not include if we hit rock. So, and also, since fuel prices are going up, boring's going to go up. Now, we did have in the budget for a boring machine, but in today's economy, what I put in the budget is kind of not going to work. So, we're still getting pretty good numbers from a couple of the contractors that I used on boring. They haven't increased a lot due to fuel and stuff like that. So, and I'm bidding it by the job, not by the foot, on the jobs I'm doing now.
So total costs on the substation?
Is going to be roughly, with you add the distribution and the transmission and the substation itself, is going to be roughly $6 million if you go with the site 2 or 3.
You don't have to know how to, off the top of your head, in either one of these locations, if there is a block.
They're going to hit out there at the school. It's a boulder.
Is it?
Yeah. When we put the distribution in underground that feeds the new school, we dug 6 inches under the ground and we hit solid rock.
Do you have any idea how many feet of rock we're talking about?
Well, down, we dug down 4 foot, and so we dug 3.5 foot of rock out of the ground.
So your line won't be that deep to start with.
Yeah. You have to, your primary needs to stay a minimum of 4 foot.
So basically, you're saying it's all dirt, it's all dig. It's all diggable. Well, all boreable.
It's boreable. Well, they can bore through rock, but there might be some places that we're going to have to dig by, with a backhoe and jackhammer rock out, backhoe. Which all that at the school we jackhammered by hand when we put that in.
And then it costs another $1.
I mean, it's not cheap.
So I assume if we did move forward with adding generation on top of the substation, that would all be under one bond. Could be, doesn't have to be. I can't think of a scenario where you wouldn't want it to be.
Timing of it.
Say that again, say it a little slower.
My assumption would be, because I can't think other than timing, if we were to go forward with the substation as well as adding generation, that would all be under the same bond.
He says
Could be. He says could be timing. My concern was timing of the cost of money. You're gambling if you wait on it, maybe you like the price now.
You think of interest, you want to know interest going up, you know what you're talking about?
You don't know. Yeah, could go down.
Yeah.
So adding, we would need to add 3 megawatts. Is that what we're looking for? 3.5? Is that what we're looking at for that one out in California? Is it just a sample?
2.5 was that one.
2.5 for one. We feel comfortable with if we would add 2.5, and that was 600,000. Is that right? For each?
There's a used 2.5 for 698 or 680.
I'm not trying to label any specific one, but just
Right.
using it as a base number. So we'd be, and then the cost to install was about $1 million.
300,000 total cost.
Total
Yeah,
cost was
yeah.
$1 million. Okay, so we'd be looking at $7 million plus bond here. If we just had to go. If you
Yeah,
roll
if you
one.
did that, I mean, you could do the generator a lot quicker, so you probably almost want to fix in that bond payment if you did that, because you know what interest rates are now.
Right. That's the conversation I'm trying to have.
For the other one, I mean, I think you're right, I mean, that's a concern of mine, is 2 years. What the heck are interest rates?
How many?
2 years.
Almost guaranteed that they're gonna be higher than that.
This is all assumptions. We haven't decided anything. I'm just trying to do some math in my head.
Glenn, how much is each million again roughly? It's about $85,000 for a bond payment?
That's kind of been the rule of thumb the last 2 years.
Yeah, if you're looking at 6 million, it's about 380 per year.
And if you look into doing the distribution also, just to let you know, we can do that in stages in-house. We don't have to do it, all of it at one time. We can spread that out through a couple of years. I mean, we've built a lot of the line that's there for the future of another substation. So there is capability of, building the distribution line to a new sub in stages where it wouldn't cost as much. Do it at all at once.
Our current, just so everybody knows, our current payment on our electrical system is $480,000.
So you'd be a little under that. The other way to do it, you're talking about bidding it all underground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'd bid it both ways to see what you get.
Well, but they're gonna be building it themselves, it sounds like anyways.
A lot.
Yeah, but either way, I mean,
So going back, I'm just going to toss some stuff out here.
And we can
It
save
needs
money
discussed.
doing the
So-
transmission.
$380,000 a year for a $6 million bond payment. If we decide to go forward with both projects with that level of megawatt generator, current payment that's coming off in 2026 for the power plant is $480,000. That's, we'd be saving. We would still be $100,000 short of what everybody's paying in their base rate on their electric bill now.
But that's only on 6 million, which is, you just said it was just a substation, so you got another million for the generator, the generation.
Oh, I thought I already put that in. Okay, you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
so,
It's pretty much at, well, okay.
right,
Okay.
you're pretty close
okay,
to it.
that's what I was, that's what I was
Yeah,
right.
that's 6 million, then 7 million would be up.
I was getting excited there for a second, thinking,
Yeah,
the base
not
rate.
Yeah,
quite.
be excited.
Not quite.
Glenn gave me a 428 payment at 7 million. I
Yeah,
asked him for last week.
Okay,
yeah.
And I am trying to currently get, I'm basing these numbers off, that substation off the engineering fund. I'm trying to get a current price of what the substation would be, that skid mount substation would be now.
sure.
They're still trying to figure that out on today's market, so what it would cost. Because they're having a hard time getting those numbers from their parts dealers, or we get switch gear and all this stuff put together. So as soon as I get that numbers, I can give you a little bit more detail of what the price would be now, what a skid mount is versus what it was in engineering. The other thing is on the transmission and the distribution. If we do a lot of it ourselves, we will be saving money because the transmission number had contractors building the transmission line. If we do it ourselves, we'll be saving money.
But based on the numbers you gave us tonight, That was you guys building, right?
The transmission was actually Evergy's numbers, and that was using a contractor build, having a contractor build it. So it's actually, I figured it'd probably save a little over $150,000 on transmission line, having us build it.
I'd rather leave it at that 6 number anyway, just because of what you said about the cost going up on everything, if not more.
And that's why I left it in.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, is there any feasible way that you guys, as two departments, feel like this total project with generation could be up to 6 million?
I'd like to say yeah, but
I think our number is a better place marker than his. I think his is probably more volatile
yes.
over the time it would take to get it going.
I'm just trying to think, like, what Corey was trying to point out is, we could have, at 6 million, you have potential savings of 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
7 million is kind of a wash. So that's what go with it in my head.
And I jumped ahead, and I know I did. Scott, I know you probably want to bring it back down to earth a little bit and go around and, I mean, it's kind of a habit between you and I. No, but, you know, we've talked a lot about the substation. We've had more conversation around it than we have actual power generation. I kind of like to know how everyone else feels about the power generation piece and sort of the concept behind that.
You can't have both. Why can't you have both?
You can. Can. I'm asking, how does everybody feel about
Maintaining 12% over peak load.
keep it up? Yeah.
And actually, we're projecting, this gets us quite a ways ahead of that. It's 2.5.
25%, and then our generation.
You talked 2.5 on generation, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what they're proposing, is 2.5, adding 2.5 to what we're currently at. And, you know, if you look at the peak loads that Jeff provided, I mean, we're at, you know, there are a few days that we hit the peak, right? But there's a few days in the year. So, again, it gets down to, you know, if you want to build to that, build hit that, on the days that we lose both feeds, we need to be able to provide that. That's when it would be valuable. The rest of the time, it's not.
I was looking at some of that voltage on the computer. And, seems like there was 10 or 12 days in there in the period where the cost was really high to do it, but not much in the long run
Well, I mean,
overall.
that's the demand the city has, and we're buying that from Evergy, right? We're using their transmission, so we're paying for that. The generators, the plant's not running. If we should lose those feeds, then they would come online and be able to provide everybody in the city with the power. And so, you know, it's just like, do you build to your peaks? Because it's more expensive than building to, you know, if you look at, you know, some cities do partial. You know, they don't build to their peak, they build to, say,
Keep the hospitals, nursing homes, keep those going.
well, I don't know how granular we get now. You know, Chris brought up a good point. Until we get that second substation, we're going to be pretty limited as to how we can, you know, distribute that. But once we get that second, we'll have the ability to do more of, you know.
I see in the 2030 range. Have you taken into consideration, or I'm sure that you have, because I believe that you're clear on enough that you would do that. But have you taken into consideration the development that's going to happen out to the east and to the west?
Yeah, I think that's part of the projections I know they brought forward were those. And they're quite a ways away from those coming online. You know, to be fully built out, and only one of them for sure is coming in to the city.
So we have Fire Tree will be built out probably by the end of the year, or at least the Blueston extension. And then I know the developer that's on the east side of town on Heritage, they are going to build out this year. But I think this west side, going across from the schools, they're going to wait for the Heritage one and kind of Fire Tree to get going a little bit more before they build this The other side of it that we will have to address, especially when we start talking about that west side development, is that technically isn't in our territory, that's in Evergy's territory, so that'll be
What?
another. That,
Everything.
Evergy owns that territory, so that'll be another discussion with that developer.
That's not the water, that's not in our area for water here. We have, never mind, that's another story.
But,
You was asking, I would like to see generation, but I would also like to see, I'd like to see, I'd like to see it together. Does that make any difference?
So that again, I can barely hear you.
I would like to see them, I would like to see both. I would like to see the generation from as well as.
substation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just how big a bond do you want to, how big a loan do you want to take
Get to
out?
talking billions of dollars, another million doesn't make that much difference.
Actually, it does. Actually, it does.
Exactly how much it
I mean, so if 380,000 or 480,000 is our current payment now, so your base rate, when you look at your electric bill, when we have it, you know, when you get it broke down the way we like it to be, that base rate is going to reflect your debt. That's going to reflect your bond payments
Yeah.
that are out there. So that 480 right now annually represents that number, or at least most of it. So $1 million plus or minus is going to have a pretty significant effect on whether or not you're increasing their electrical bill, the citizens, or lowering it.
Where you going to have to increase the bills or
You don't. Now, if we stay under $480,000 a year on that bond payment,
something.
yeah. That's
But
right.
with doing, to Jerry's point though, with doing all of it, projections show that we won't have to increase that.
That's yeah.
It would remain the same. It wouldn't go down.
But I'm appealing to what your comment about saying, could we do it for 6?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to save that $100,000 a year to disperse and give back to the people on their base rate.
So to do both, what's it cost?
About 7, well, based on their
Projected
projection,
7, let's use the 7.
7 million. You said 428.
7 million.
$428,000 a year, which would be 480s are what we're paying now. But
So basically one.
that'll go all the way to 2026.
You're right, so you're the same way.
$72,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're 72,000. We would be $72,000 short in 2026 of what we're paying now.
Now, we could, I mean, there is potential that, based on that GRDA contract, that there could be more savings at that point, depending on what the council chooses to do up until that, which we're gonna have to start negotiating.
And that's figured under current interest?
That's, yeah. So that's why I'm saying it's basically a wash, because you have to project interest is going to go up based on the trend that we're seeing right now.
You make it sound like the quicker we could get to do it, the more money we could save.
I mean, in the long run, yeah.
Well, we wouldn't, because if you did it earlier than 2026, you'd be double what you're paying.
But your bond is, you've got 2 years to complete the project, and then your bond is still another year after that, your first one.
Right.
So you're 3 years out.
Yeah,
Even if you start.
we never feasibly started earlier than that, so.
What'd you say per household, 270,000?
It's anywhere from, yeah, so I think what Jeff showed us, it was, you know, it
That was
was
a year?
120,
How much does that bring up a month?
divided by 12,
$10. $10 a ton.
yeah, $10 at 120 a year, or $20 at the 240 a year.
20 bucks? That's good.
That's with today's paper capacity rates. They're projected to go way up, so it'll eventually, it'll catch itself, we assume.
I don't know how anybody else feels, but I think $20 every month is good.
It's a conversation you're trying to start.
It is. I'm not trying to start it. I'm just trying to make sure it gets out there so that we get feedback. Because I'm one vote of 5,000 citizens, one vote of council, but what I believe doesn't necessarily mean what's right for the majority of people. So I want to make sure as many people understand what the numbers are and they can provide feedback one way or the other.
So what was your thought process on that?
My thought process is I'm neutral on it. I really like to see how people believe. It's less than I thought it was going to be, quite frankly, which is good. I'm of the opinion that for the remaining couple years of my term, I'm going to be harping on affordability. right? It's just gonna be everything we do. And so I appreciate the fact that we're looking at maintaining the debt level, but we have a chance to lower it potentially, which gets into more affordable. So not raising it's a good thing, I get it, but it's not as good as lowering. And so we just have to make sure we understand that and we're making those decisions in that, hey, we have a chance, we have a loan that's, you know, your car's getting paid off. You wanna run a couple years with no payments, or are you gonna run back out and, you know, buy a brand new car and get those payments back to where they were? And that's just kind of a personal decision, that's a city decision, but that's how I'm looking at it. We have a chance, because the debt's falling off, to maybe lower that debt payment, but if it doesn't make sense because of all the things we're trying to do, then we shouldn't do that. I just want everybody to think about it.
I remember when we bought electricity for $9 a month. If you can believe that. And look how it's escalated in my lifetime. And nothing is going to stay the same. It's all going to escalate. And it seems to me that the $20 is really not, or the $15 or 14, 18, whatever it turns out to be, it's really not going to be that big of a deal to me. And if you take a look at this is not a wealthy community, but this is a pretty well balanced community. I don't know. I'd pay the $20 to have electricity.
Yeah, and let's be clear, that's an insurance payment to have electricity when Evergy fails. That's really what it is.
If you do both of them, you insure it yourself.
Right.
Right. I don't have anything else to say. I'll shut up.
No, that's good.
What I talk all the time.
So I guess being devil's advocate, playing your spot. Philosophically, I could argue
Did this Friday.
that if you're not increasing, you are decreasing based on the rate of inflation. If you're not increasing
Don't disagree.
your rate by 7% of last year's inflation rate, you are actually decreasing based on what others. That's kind of my thought.
That's one way to look at it.
It is, but it's economics. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
like, hey, you could be paying more. It's always you could be paying more.
Yeah.
Always. I
Um,
get it.
I said this in the finance committee, and I'll say it here, is I'm on the mindset that I would like to, I'm in favor of at least maintaining our generation now, whether we have to add that second one 3-4 years down the road. I'm a little bit more gray on that. Right now, I'm based off of what we saw in the summer of 2018, for that week that everybody else around us was out hot times, and then last February's event. Based on the information that we learned on being able to buy our capacity during the low time, which is early in the mornings, 2, 3 in the mornings, other communities that are locked in contracts can't do that, so that helps control our expenses that way. And then I also feel like with the GRDA contract coming up, I think we will have some savings there to where we can start looking at more ways to supplement with, whether it's more solar power purchase agreement with that 2-3 megawatt solar system in town, which when you look at these peaks, that's when we're hitting our peaks, is during July and August when it's hot and our baker comes back on. I mean, that's when we're close to our peak, and that's when our solar goes. So that's kind of how my thought process. I think I shared that in the finance.
I'll say mine too. I mean, if you guys are calling out now that $4 mark instead of the $2.25 for the paper capacity, and that's what the numbers that you're seeing for the futures, then if you think of this as an insurance policy, which is what it is, by the time you hit that break-even mark of 2026, 4 years from now, you're getting your insurance for free. There's no premium. Right? Am I thinking about that right? So if you are paying a little bit now, if you are in that $250 range annually, $10, $20 a month, I mean that's going to start going down as you get closer to 2026. You're slowly dwindling away your premium until you're not paying a premium, and you have the insurance for nothing.
I think both KMEA's workup and mine says the same thing, it was gone about different ways. I looked at the savings, he looked at the cost. But it basically, it showed some savings from now until year 2026. But after 2026, it either went flat or it went in reverse, where it actually cost you more.
Right.
So, yes, so what you're saying is, if you give up the generation, you're losing that part of it, but yet the price is gonna be the same. You're not gonna have any savings starting in 2026,
Right.
so.
And the bulk of this payment wouldn't even be until after that, because this is $1 million of the $7 million.
Right. Right.
So, really, and we're looking at a wash from what our current payments are. Looking at adding $1 million, so we might go up slightly during that year overlap between when our bond payment is now and when our bond payment of the current system goes off. We'll have 1 year of that we'll have to plan for, because if we our first bond payment won't be till 2024, right?
On which one?
On the generator. And
If
if
we
we
got
did, we did 2 separate bonds, one for the generator for the $1 million. That bond payment's gonna hit us quicker than the substation bond payment, because substation's already done for 2 years.
Yeah, right now, we're about two years difference. The other thing to make this more complicated for you is that we do have our solar field, which has been there for 2 years right now, and after year 7, we have the opportunity to purchase that. So that's coming up also. So you have the GRDA contract, you have to make a decision on your downtown generation, the substation, and the solar field all are in play here in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so that was the other part I was gonna bring up, not the solar, forgot about that, but, what is the plan for downtown? I mean, there's 3 megawatts, it could, we're on borrowed time.
So we are.
So,
We're probably
so-
10 years.
what's that?
We're probably 10 years we've been on borrowed time.
Okay,
on
so
that.
my point is, are we being short-sighted and not trying to get a longer-range plan that, so if we buy this 2.5, what are you doing when that goes down next year?
You'd be in the same position we are right now.
Yeah, so what's the plan? Where are we gonna stick another 3? Are we gonna, is there room out there?
Well, depending on what unit we put in out there, it may not fit in the 3rd spot anyway. So it may be having to add a section to the north of the building. But most of the ones that we're looking at are skid mount units now, so there wouldn't have to be a basement in whatever addition was put on, so that would keep the cost of the addition down on it. And so my thought is if you're going to put one in there now, one skid mount unit now, you make the building big enough for 2 or 3 for the future. That's just my thoughts on it, just planning for the future, because sooner or later, and nobody has the magic 8 ball to know when the downtown plant's gonna fail, but sooner or later, it's not gonna be available. So, if you're doing what you can to plan, for the future, which is, I think, what we've done all along, and what Rob started on that deal is planning for that. And like I said, in the demonstration I did last month, is that second generator that's in the works, that timeframe can move depending on what happens. What our load growth does, what happens in downtown, so.
So
Did that answer your question, or?
Yeah. But I think, so then how's the solar mapping and all that, what is the 5-year plan? I think we have the plan to potentially replace in downtown, and then, does that change whether we buy the solar field or not? I mean, those are all the questions I think we ought to try to come up with something we're all in agreement with, if this is how it goes. And it just feels like we're trying to throw on this 2.5 million, 2.5 meg right now because we think we're gonna need it based on projections, and we will.
Full based on current need, if we're peaking out.
On the solar field?
No, on the additional generation.
I'm not bringing in the solar field. I'm probably not as gung ho as Glenn might be on purchasing it, because it's a power purchase agreement, and we've had a lot of problems with the inverters on there. So,
Well, they get less efficient as the years go
yeah,
on too.
so I'm not as,
I don't see the pros and cons, I don't know, all that.
Yeah, we should have, because it'll drop the price per kilowatt hour is what it'll do.
If you buy a solar field, you're assuring yourself that you'll have electricity to start your car.
not mine.
You don't have
Yeah,
a
but
Tesla anymore.
I think the next few years of the solar performance will tell us at that point, you know, what's the dollar head.
Yeah, you still got
we pay for it, or
5
do
more
we
years
just
to-
keep buying?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're there yet, because we don't
No,
have a good
we just,
performance on
yeah,
it.
that's why we did 1 megawatt to start.
Right, but to knock on wood, ever since they were here, at the end of the year, all the inverters have been working now.
Yeah.
And none of them have tripped offline, so I think they may have finally, got it to where it's gonna be dependable now.
Well, depending on what's going on with everything, I mean, if you watch the news, it looks like the federal government's gonna push harder towards renewable. There might be some stuff coming down for the cities for that, so that's all.
We don't know what battery technology is gonna be available in 5 years, so
Right.
storage,
That
changes every day. Yeah.
Solar on my house, 'cause
yeah.
I suspect that the payoff will be.
Back to your point, Scott, I mean, I think it is fair. I mean, personally, I'd like to not see us go over that 488 mark. I'd like to see not raise our rates, but at the same time, I'd also like not to be in the middle of a 20-year bond and need to buy more generation in 7 years. You know what I mean?
That 7-year wasn't a take it or leave it. There were several options throughout that contract to buy that field. That was the first one.
I meant if the downtown generators fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I could say, okay, we're gonna plan on this in 7 years, and our reserves, we're gonna build those up to X. So
You
that
can
we
do it that way.
just use reserves to purchase that as a generator and not go into that situation. Because right now, we have enough in the reserves, where we could pay cash for it if we just so chose to. Without that.
Well, I think, and maybe it's a situation too where we decide, the council makes a decision and then we give the green light to go shopping and you're like, hey, we found 2 for the price of, you guys have ran into a couple of those situations where it's like, there's 2 of them, they want to unload 2 of them and you get them a little cheaper, so. Anyway, that's.
I just wanna make sure we're all clear, because it's confusing. We have enough capacity to support our needs today. We don't necessarily have enough generation to support prior peak loads on maybe 6 or 7 days of the year. Is that a fair statement?
For planning purposes, you have
So-
to plan for the worst day and the best.
You do,
And with
if your goal is to be able to provide that full load on those days.
and with current growth. I mean, growth that we know, right? We know there's going to be some growth in the next 2 years. That will probably push, maybe not, it's not going to push all this truck out, but it's going to push more of the days.
Yeah,
You'll have more days out.
and then we'll have more information about what it looks like coming out of the pandemic, which I think everybody's concerned about, rightfully so. But it's still an unknown, is it gonna dramatically increase where we were in the past 2 years? And if it does, it's a clear sign of, yeah, this is neat. If it doesn't, we're gonna say, well, what's going on?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to sit in your hot tub as much as you used to.
I'm solar powered.
Yeah, I'm
So-
not worried about it.
So, and that's just where I'm coming from.
So my intent from this meeting was to get all the information together. You guys go out, gather information from the community. I was gonna treat it like we have been for the street plan and just put it on every agenda. So that way, if we have any new data, any new information, anything, we can talk about it.
So, what is the conclusion that you've come to in this meeting? What area are we setting at? What are we setting? Are we going to do both?
Let me ask you a different way, because we can't vote on it tonight.
Well, no, there's no vote to be
So
made.
what's the timeline for making the decision Jerry wants to make?
But, I mean, it's, as with anything, if it's on the agenda, anybody can make a motion, you can take a vote at any time on that agenda item. So the potential is there at any moment on any meeting to go ahead and take the vote once council members feel comfortable to go ahead and voice their opinion for the vote. You know, that's kind of keeping it open-ended at that, because I know that some in here probably feel like they want to get some more information from the public, and just get some more feedback. Some are probably ready to go ahead and vote next meeting. But, you know, until we get into those situations and those votes are cast, I don't know, or we're on the council meeting, we don't really know where we are. I don't know. I know where my personal feelings are on it. And
Tell him.
I did tonight. I feel like we need to add that 2.5 megawatt generator to go ahead and continue to maintain. And I think that the substation is kind of inevitable.
We kind of agree on something
For once. We'll see if that happens.
So are you gonna go out and get refreshed bids, or are you?
I'm trying to get a refresh bid on the skid mount substation. I am working on that.
Because
I think we need to
I'd be
really
hesitant of voting on anything without knowing what it is.
I'm trying to get these numbers nailed down, but it's just difficult.
It's gonna be difficult, probably for,
Next year or so.
yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. So we're in unprecedented times. Do we believe that these prices are that are jumping 35 to 7% are not coming down? They're gonna start there and go further?
I honestly think if we get this, a lot of it has to do with relations overseas and stuff like that, and with China and everything else, because that's where we get a lot of the transformers and stuff, such, and wire. I think I don't want to get into politics too much, but
That's kind of what's driving some of these prices.
yeah,
Might not be able to
I
afford
think once the current administration maybe is out, then maybe it might get better. I don't know. Seems like it's getting kind of screwed up here lately. So that's just my personal opinion. I mean, but do I see the prices going down? I think once relations, foreign relations get calmed down maybe, and the pandemic is just, the COVID thing is completely gone. Yeah, I think it might go back down. Yeah, the wire prices and the transformers prices and stuff like that. Transformers, they deal with metal and oil. You know how oil is, it goes up, it goes down. Right now it's just up.
So my point is, are we rushing into, we're buying at the peak, like the housing market?
How would you know that? How would you ever figure
You never do.
You never do.
But you look at history, you look at what's going on, you say, is it gonna continue like this forever? Is it gonna come back down a little bit when things go on?
I can honestly say I have never seen the prices since I've been here to do this. I mean, since I've been in charge or been working here.
It may be one of those things where the council, as a body, we decide, hey, let's do one part of it now. Maybe it's the generator. Let's do that now because we have one in the works. But let's push off 6 months and let's reevaluate the substation in 6 months to see what the price is.
I don't want to push anything off anywhere.
That's what I was getting at.
I mean, the first thing that has to come down with the substation is workload. I mean, before we decide to, go forward with buying the substation, the skid mount and start with the transmission stuff, we need to figure out where to put it first. I mean, that's the number one thing. And until that's locked in 100%,
Good point.
I don't
Are
see.
you going to have to build a building, Jeff, to put this in?
Excuse me?
Are you going to have to build a building to put a generator in?
The generator? Yes.
Possibly, yes.
I do know for a fact
If
that
you build one, why don't you build enough, big enough for future?
That was a thought, yes.
Are you talking about the generator or the substation?
Generator, it's what-
But with the skid mount, I thought we still had one space.
He had mentioned that with the skid mounts, you would be able to expand the current building and not have to go under and need a basement for, right?
Right.
Right, so it would just be extending a slab. It'd be much more cost effective if you were to get a skid mount generator, 'cause it's conditional on that.
and that building was meant to be added on. It was built to add on to the north fairly easy.
Is there a slab there on that side?
No, there's an open space.
And did your million include that building or just?
Yes.
You did,
Hopefully, yes.
for the single unit or big enough for?
big enough for a single at least. Again, we haven't gone out for bids on it.
Yeah,
So
right.
we're pulling numbers out of the air.
Yeah, no, that's a good place to start, and as it gets closer, we're gonna have to get a little more finite on what you get.
Are you leaning towards, because we talked about purchasing, or the cost of what it would be, is it gonna escalate in cost, and are you talking with the idea in mind to purchase some of this material at this point in time, or are you, because leaning towards waiting, which way are you going here?
My suggestion was, we might wait 6 months and see whether these prices hold or they start dropping, or we have a better line of sight into, we need to act immediately because it's the lowest price we're gonna see in the rest of our lives, or we might wanna wait another 6 months because we think the price is gonna be lower and we're gonna be able to pay less for it.
Well, in the 6-month period, are you also talking about waiting on buying the generator?
I personally would be yes, but I think that's a personal decision.
I think that's where Scott and I might differ a little bit.
How might we do?
Yeah, we do.
I hate to really come out and say this, but I think we're about to agree on something again.
Where I think we probably, my opinion is move a little quicker on the generator, secure that at the price, because I don't think that's gonna go down. It's a used generator. But I tend to lean towards Scott's opinion on the substation, where we push it down 6 months and see what these prices do, if they do level out and start trending down or not.
Well, I understand where he's coming from, but I like where you're coming from too.
So you're agreeing with both of us?
Yeah, I do, I love you both.
You're very agreeable tonight.
I think Chris's point, in the meantime, I think,
I ain't over yet.
council, we could decide on location.
I
I
agree.
think that's work that we can do.
That's the number one thing that needs to be done, is find out where to put it.
Because and then could you not, I guess, start slowly building out with materials you have now to,
On the distribution? Yes, absolutely.
and so that would help bring down the cost if the trend continued
Correct.
in the progression that it is.
And we can start nailing down the pricing on transmission and also. I mean, because once the distribution, a lot of it, a lot of it's going to be built along the highway, and a lot of it's all going to be underground, and all our feeders are on the highway pretty much, except for one. So, a lot of that work we can do in-house, or, except for some of the boring we'll have to do under some highways and stuff like that. But
So, I guess maybe I'm confused. I thought we had to bring the line from Elm Street all the way up.
we do. That's the line that I was talking about. It's not on the highway. We can connect to several of the feeders, but we'll also bring a line from the substation, the current substation, to the new substation, so we can link them together.
And then you run along 56?
A lot of yes.
Okay, is this gonna entail what the state's gonna do with widening that highway that I keep hearing about?
No, I will. A lot of that stuff we already know what they're going to do. So, now all those plans are pretty much set where they're going to be. And we've moved all the utilities that we had on the highway already out of those areas. So, and it shouldn't be that bad to get the distribution to that area. I mean, my numbers are estimated a little high due to the price fluctuations and kind of projecting out how far we're going to get before we start this project. So, it's just kind of hard to estimate costs right now. Extremely hard.
If we select a site, you can at least start getting bids, one bid instead of 4, right?
That would, yeah.
And then focus on that.
Yes. If we can get a site just nailed down where we're going to have, if we get exactly where we're going to have it, we can get it laid out how we're going to do it. I can get a lot of the distribution built to the site, and then I can start also planning on the transmission and getting stuff like that built to the site. So when the skid mount comes in, we can And, we can do certain things, like part of that number that they have in the engineering study for the sub is, there's a grounding grid, there's copper, or concrete. I can honestly tell you that concrete's probably never gonna go down. And, we could get the ground grid laid out, and we could also get the concrete poured for the site. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do to get ready for it until,
Price of steel for concrete's almost as high as concrete, isn't it?
Concrete right now is $145 a yard, I do believe.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Big 120 like
it's, and that was 6 months ago, or 3 months ago, I poured a pad that was $145 a yard.
It went up the first of the year.
Huh?
It went up the first of the year.
Did it? That's nice. It doesn't surprise me, but I know the concrete companies will tell you straight up that concrete will never go down. It's always going to continue to go up.
So I guess, from you guys, are we prepared to go ahead and talk about hone in on the site location at this next meeting? Try to get that.
And you had some numbers, didn't you? Do you have those to hand out? Can you look at them ahead of time?
Oh, here. Just pass it around. And that's basically, basically this is the information I gave you at the last work session meeting. The numbers, the transmission and distribution numbers are a little different from the last handout, but that's the last handout I gave you, and those were the prices, the evaluations of the property, or appraised property value, and then what the person was asking for the property, and the locations of it.
So site one was out by the school, right?
Site one is out by the school.
2 is on the
It is,
west side of 2nd Street.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You say these numbers are updated numbers or these old numbers?
Those are the updated numbers on the distribution and the transmission. The numbers on the property haven't changed.
Well, site 3 guys,
Site 3, yes, site 3 is,
is 0,
I'm not exactly, yeah.
because we negotiate that in.
Okay. I also don't exactly know what's going on there, so.
Thank you, sir.
These are the maps of the.
Sorry, I was trying to knock it down and not bring this huge map in.
Okay. Okay. This is where the transmission line would go, and then it's got the sites listed on where they're at, so.
I think I got one of them. That's,
So, in this big line you have drawn around, that's our current transmission?
No, that's the transmission line that would have to be built to those sites.
Okay. Within those transmission lines, do we own all that territory already from Evergy?
No, but that's the discussion with them. They had no problem with us building in their easement, their current easement.
Well, I'm thinking more future customers, future growth within these.
On this one here, we do have the territory right now that's that's along 200 Road, but along the highway that is currently for sale. We do have that territory now. The back side of the highway is Casey Pinnell, or Evergy, excuse me, and they had, in the conversation we had, they said that they wouldn't have a problem with us building in their easement. Now, what they say later down the road, who knows, but Evergy's kind of all over the place right now, so. But yeah, we have those boundaries in was it right in the middle of 200 Road and High Street from, there's that land that's for sale. We have those boundaries right now. And we have the boundaries along the highway.
Is site one where the tower is? Okay.
It's where the West Water Tower
is. What is
to the north of West Water Tower.
the expansion of the solar field though? Where on the school district property was that? That's that same place. So if we chose site one, we would be eliminating that as a potential spot for the solar field. No.
It could be built.
Well, plenty of room.
Okay.
So we're not worried about that, it's not tall enough to have much of a fall radius. That's understood. The site one. Quite a bit more expensive to build out.
The distribution would be more, and so would the transmission. And then site 4, the distribution was going to cost. It's going to be costly to build to that area, which is Ralph Earl's. The general location that would be the ID site was either 2 or 3. Would be those 2 areas. And currently, the one is, the city owns part of that property. Are there in negotiations, or I don't know what's going on quite with that.
We're under contract. Sell that property.
Okay, and is she agreed to everything?
Well, I don't know on that side, but they already agreed either way that they would grant us, part of the contract was they would grant us an easement for subdivision.
Okay.
Part of their job.
And we have the footprint, that I gave Glenn the footprint of the substation, which is also in the engineering study. Now, when you look into the numbers that I've got in there for the distribution and transmission, they're different from what the engineer has in here. The engineering study, you got to realize it was from July 21, and things have went up quite a bit since then. He also did not add in the switch that was going to be needed on the transmission line. That was not added in his engineering study. That's something that has to be there. So
That was $200K.
That was around $200,000, and it's an automated switch. We paid for the 2 that were out there the 2 that are on Orange and 6th. And at that time, I think we paid a little over $100,000 for them. And that was give us the capability, once the power's out, that one feeder dumps, the other one picks up automatically. We don't have to wait for somebody to come out and actually do the switching.
That's what we were having a problem with last year, right?
They were not working properly, and they've since came out and they've gotten the problem fixed. We were actually having a whole bunch of
the same deal where they would own it and maintain it.
They would own the switch and maintain it, yes.
We have to buy it and they would own it.
But we'd still have to put that switch in, and the location that the transmission has got to go, we'd still have the capability of having 2 feeds at that new set. It's all in the placement of the switch before the regulators, after the regulators, that type of thing.
So what's the cost, what's the significant cost differential on the distribution between 2 and 3 and 4? Is it
On the
additional,
distribution?
additional distance between 2 and 3 to get to 4?
Yeah.
Going across the middle of the highway?
Yes.
Is that right?
And then getting back into the location.
To tie into
Yeah. To tie in.
How many feet are you figuring?
That's what I was talking about. That's gonna,
The feed?
How many feeds?
Feeds.
Several
Oh,
different feeds.
there'd be 7 different feeds. There'd be 5.
5 different feeds. So you're not building it once, you're building it 5 times.
Yeah.
basically the closest location to 6th and Orange is your least amount of distribution cost. Is that?
Yes. Well, closest to 2nd and High is where a lot of the the 6th and High is where a lot of the distribution is at. The different feeders. So you can get to a lot more of them on the highway and tie into them a lot easier. And there wouldn't be a big footprint. because like I said, most of it be underground, back in the easements, so. And in doing that, I also took, part of that is to the overhead line that's going along the highway, possibly putting that underground, the 3-phase line there. Underground is more expensive because you have to use bigger wire. The wire that we have above ground is rated for so much. The underground, the size of wire has to be a lot bigger because of the insulation factor and stuff like that. So that's what brings up the cost on underground. Plus the conduit. I mean, conduit is based on oil prices. So that's just the way it is. It goes up, it goes down.
Sounds like down 2 and 3. Looks like. What are the pros and cons in those two?
Well, 3 is the current land that as Casey said, that they're under contract on buying the old motel land and possibly the trailer park behind it. In doing that, they're going to put in the contract that we have a spot for the substation and the easement that we need. So
So buying an incremental land in addition to what we've got? Okay. That's what, is that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to buy both of those pieces, the cities and I don't know where they sit on a map or anywhere, anything, but.
But the 2,556,000, does that include, I missed the piece of that conversation earlier, it was kind of on the side, but did the cost of the easement, was that calculated, so would that never come down now that was already negotiated in there?
Site 3 is the,
Okay,
is the motel lot.
never mind.
yeah,
I don't know, do
there's
Those
no
estimates
not including easements.
Okay,
so that's just.
that's tough.
That's just the cost of the material and doing it.
So I think what Scott was getting, where's the $300,000 between 2 and 3 come from? The difference since they're basically right across the street.
Oh, between 2 and 3, there's one feeder that's going to have to be extended a little bit and moved, and some things are going to have to be moved around.
Okay.
To make 3 work, to make 2 work.
To make 2 work, yes. It's basically there's a street there and some other things that are sewer issues and stuff like that have to be contended with to get some of the underground into it. There's a lot of stuff in sight too. I think Rob and both of us know that we don't know where the hell it's at.
The underground utilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that.
So that's kind of a contingency money because we don't know where everything's at in that area.
Make sure you call before you dig.
Well, we call before we dig anything, but a lot of people don't know where everything's at.
You don't know what you're
That's-
getting to when you get down there.
A lot of that is private utilities and not mapped.
You can't depend on that either.
Private utilities, what's a private utility?
It's their own.
Trailer parks,
It's-
wastewater systems, electric,
Parcel land.
I didn't need to do that.
just like the sewer.
So they just did their own and we connected?
They connect with one trunk line and then they put their sewer.
But it goes everywhere. It's kind of spooky.
They have a master meter, takes in for place, pay off.
But that was installed a long, long time ago, and
Right.
nobody has maps and nobody knows where it's at. So
It was a site too that you don't know what you're getting. Right.
That would all be, all that stuff would be disconnected anyway, so if you run into it, it wouldn't make a difference, would it?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
well,
It needs to be.
It needs to be.
Before that land, before that lot sells, it needs to be.
but,
That's on the owner to do that prior to anything being done. on
but
the
nothing
lot.
has been done yet, so.
Meyer, I know Meyer's lot hasn't been disconnected. I've got pictures of when the sewer taps that are still above ground and open.
It's kind of a weird lot, you know, it's got it's probably in the floodplain quite a bit there too, as far as, I'm not really sure, but
There's
kinda
gonna have to
dies
be
down.
there's gonna have to be some buildup also.
Yeah, but it's also, I don't know, the way the city kind of curves right into it, it's kind of got a nice, you know, curb appeal. If anybody wanted to put something there nice, I don't know, then maybe for me personally, it looks like Site 3 might be the best bet, more cost effective, less unknowns, and I don't know, I just kind of like to see something be done with that bigger lot. I have no control over that, we, as governing body, have no control over that unless the city decides to buy it and do something with it, but, there's no hard to find space like that.
I agree, I think that spot's probably that one. Somebody's gonna develop it, whether it's, you know, a little tiny home, I'd love to see a little tiny home.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Subdivision there.
It's zone residential still?
I think it's zone residential,
It is.
but it's on
Yeah.
one tract, so they have to go through the rezoning, pre-planning process and all that.
Right.
Right.
I think they've had some interest, it just nobody's.
As far as visually on Site 3, I mean, what are some creative ways that we can,
So part of that to the substation, my thoughts were to put it behind the automotive place that's there now, where it's kind of hidden from the highway, but we'd also be putting up some fencing and stuff like that around it. Now you can get elaborate if you wanted to really go that far. There's some people that build house, like you can go to Kansas City, you'll drive through a neighborhood, and there's a house sitting there, but you know nobody lives there, and there's lines running to it.
no kidding.
There's a substation built inside the house. I mean, Manhattan, they got a substation built inside of a garage.
Well, I mean, really, we could do that with this area, I mean, being behind that canyon.
I was thinking some cypress trees or something, but
Okay.
house.
A little better than that, yeah.
Really,
But, I mean, there's all kinds of ways of hiding it. You just got to be careful you don't get into the cooling part of it. You know, keeping the transformer cool and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, the venting.
But this isn't, since we're going all underground, presumably, not as much will be visual.
Yeah, I was
So-
gonna ask, we're going underground for both transmission and distribution, is that the plan?
Well, the transmission line will probably there'll be parts of it that are overhead, and then they'll we're going to be trying to put most of it underground.
That's where it starts to get unsightly, is you get a lot of lines coming in.
But the distribution that was all going to be done underground.
But going to the substation, is that all underground? I mean, like, I guess I'm visualizing like 4 fences with the substation, you know, in the middle of it, and nothing overhead.
That's what we're trying to do. Yes.
That's,
I mean, I don't know if you've seen the picture of the skid mount.
The nothing overhead, so we're gonna have some overhead.
Not at the substation site.
yeah,
Not the substation side.
going to or from it, there might
So basically, the skid mount substation, there's a picture of it kind of in the back of your book, what it looks like. And
I can pass it over here.
you can pass the book around, and that's the footprint of it. That's what it's going to look like. And everything comes in on a skid. And it's already pre-manufactured and already been tested. That's the nice thing about it. It's already been tested, and so we can just hook up to it.
So we
But
can
all our
place-
lines will be going into that area underground.
You guys want to take a look at that?
Wow.
Where do they come back above ground and go?
Well, potentially, I'm trying to make it so everything's underground.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Right.
I'm trying to make everything underground. There might be a section of the transmission line where it goes across an area that it might have to go overhead because Evergy
Yeah.
is got established area, and if we can use their easement, then they'll have an overhead line also there. So,
It's much more palatable in town if you can stay underground.
correct.
It gets to look like.
Trying to
industrial.
find a site for a substation where it's locally between all your feeders, so it's not going to cost you a lot of money, is very hard because, well, you know, nobody wants to see it. So,
Not my bad.
And I don't think Julie really likes Site 4,
No,
because that's right in her backyard. So,
and it would be a problem because it floods out there.
yeah, that'd have to be built back up. Yeah.
But something like that, we can plant trees and shrubbery around it to, if we wanted to go cheaper.
You're asking for squirrels, Casey.
You can do it like they do, you can do it like they do some water pumping stations. You can make it look like a regular house and be the nice looking house, nicest looking house in the block, and you got a pump station inside. Got foliage and shrubs and driveway and looks like a
Big
garage.
offense.
Best looking house on the block.
There's several of them in Kansas City that way. Yeah. That you wouldn't even know they're in other big cities. You know, we went to Nashville one year, and I wanted to go look at the substation that I seen was built inside of a house. I mean, I just, my wife thought I was stupid, but I wanted to see what it looked like. 'Cause you know,
She wanted to go see Graceland down in Memphis.
we've seen all that stuff, but I wanted to see how the substation was concealed in the house. I mean,
I'd like to see that too.
So any of these sites actively on the market, other than number 3, or they're just willing to sell to the city? That's number 3 on the market.
these are people
The
that
others
I
are willing to sell to the city.
3 was on the market, and the other 4 and 2, or 4 and 3. I actually went and talked to the people that own the property, and 2 was on the market already, and went and talked to the school district.
I'm good with number 3, if it's on the market, it's gonna be sold, and they're willing, the new buyer's willing to carve out this in their building plan. I think it's the easiest.
That's where I'm at too. Is this something we have to eventually vote on? We're not acquiring
Do we
property.
need to vote on this?
Not on the placement of it, I don't think. If we're gonna go on the land that we're selling, I don't think we need to. We'll just agree that we're gonna put it there.
So that is something we can kind of talk for. Tonight, if we want.
Actually, it's out of that.
Yeah, I think we have a consensus tonight. Can't
Yeah,
vote.
there would be a
Consensus
consensus
is all
on
we
that
need.
shit.
Yeah.
A dime.
I mean, it's only possible
Probably
because
not.
the entity's combining our land with another parcel. Because this is not all of us, correct?
Correct, that is not
That would be
us.
the-
So if that doesn't happen, then I think we're kind of back to the drawing board, is that what we want to try to go do?
If it
If they
doesn't,
don't, if the third party doesn't combine them both,
we can still put it, they still, so we can put it on our parcel, so
over here?
one way or the other.
Yeah.
Really?
They said that.
Yeah, regardless if they purchase the other land, which I know she's talking to them, she called me a couple weeks ago.
I wouldn't think that has room for it,
Yeah, we'll wedge it into one corner or the other, so.
but I think that makes it even easier than for me to
I think so.
say we should focus on 3 and on the planning piece of it.
The only other potential issue I can see with this is you're awfully close to residential area, and FERC, one of the two, has requirements on substations where they have to be fenced, they have to be security lit.
And it will be, yeah.
And that awfully close to resident, I don't know what the plans are for Jackie Strata Court, if that's, part of that's going residential or not, but that's something to keep in mind too, is that it has to be security lit, just like, this one down here on the edge of
Right.
town, it's never been a problem, because there's not very many houses real close. But,
So it'll be different than what we have in North Street.
well, no, not lighting wise, but there's not any houses real close to it, going across the street, but if you get down, that's what Chris is talking about, it's hard to find a spot in the middle of town that
Yeah.
people will put up with when you start talking about, like, I gotta have a fence, we have containment, it's got security lit, looks like a cruise ship sitting there in the middle of the night.
Are they?
They have a little hum to them.
That, the hotter it is,
Right.
the hotter it is, the louder the fans kick on sometimes.
But with the substation, with having 2 substations, it should not be working as hard as that one is down there.
We'll be screaming.
Yeah.
Have the age on it.
They don't have it. That one has 8. That one there. That what? Yeah, it's 20. It's 21 years old, and it's getting, you know, to its max usage. I mean, it's going to hum quite a bit, and the fans kick on. The fans are not really that loud, but I mean, it hums.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to put some fencing around it. But I mean, things can be concealed. I mean, they can be. But yeah, he's right about the lighting. I mean, but that can be also concealed with. It just has to be lit or inside the area, and we have to have signs posting.
So that's someone on Newton is 21 years old. So was our old substation, was it just behind the power plant there, was that all we had?
Yeah,
Wow,
and that one was probably about 70 years old.
yeah.
And that's the one they used to have, huh?
Was it the 50s?
Yeah, it was put in the 50s, I do believe, but they actually had, that was scary times. They had sprinklers. They had sprinklers going on it, keeping it cool with and homemade box fans out there keeping it cool. And the transformer was supposed to be gray, and it was actually orange.
Okay.
So you could actually see it at night, very, very bright.
Satellite.
Black box and everything.
Yeah. That I don't want to ever get back to those kind of times. That was, huh?
Made this tougher, right, Jerry?
I'm sorry?
Made this tougher, getting through those.
Oh, yeah, good
I
times.
don't remember.
Do that.
I had a stroke, don't you remember that?
You know, it was just, you know, they used to pull the overcurrent relays out of the switchgear and stuff to keep it going and stuff. It was just, we tied the whole town together and watch it. No.
So I guess for a continuous discussion on this in every council meeting, we're gonna focus on 3 and numbers start just focusing on that.
Sounds good.
Give you a little less to have to go do. Work for you guys?
I'll get a little bit more correction.
Agreed.
Anything, let's get it done.
I just needed a solid direction to go with on,
Yeah.
you know, where we're gonna put it and stuff.
I
That
think
helps.
you just got it.
It's very
It's
helpful.
official.
All right, anything else tonight? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Survey.